Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be taking a look at quite a few new releases. So from Dior we have the new Pastel Glow eyeshadow palette. This is part of the summer collection. We also have the new Tom Ford Architecture Soft Matte Foundation. I've been wearing this for a week now, so you know it's not really a first impressions. Then we also have the new lip items from Charlotte Tilbury. So this is the lipstick and pencil in the Pillow Talk Fair. And then in the new Big Lip Plumpgasm lip gloss, this is going to be the shade Medium Deep. And I have a mix of those on my lips right now. And in addition, we're also going to be taking a look at the newest shade of the Danessa Myricks Yummy Skin blushes. These are the Blurring Balm blushes. This is the shade It Girl. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's start off with the Tom Ford foundation. So the foundation is the Architecture Soft Matte. This is replacing their Traceless Soft Matte foundation. And the shade range is a little different. So packaging wise, we've got kind of this heavy duty cap. You can see how much resistance there is to pulling this off. So it definitely goes on strongly. We have 1 fluid ounce. I have the shade 00 Pearl. So this is 00 Pearl. And let me just go ahead and spread that out. So I'm keeping a heavy swatch here and blended it out right here, right up to the midline of my hand. We'll let this sit while we're talking about this and we look at the demos, and then take a look at the oxidation level as well. Now, this foundation itself comes in a heavy duty glass frosted bottle. Let's go ahead and take a look at the demos and the wear tests while we talk about this. Now, the Architecture Soft Matte Blurring Foundation has 1 fluid ounce, is made in Canada, and we have a 2-year shelf life for this. And again, as I mentioned, we do have a new shade range here. So I'm wearing shade 0.0 Pearl, and it's already available at several retailers. Now, this is a soft matte foundation. You can see when I put this on my skin, and you can see in each of those demos, by the way, I am using a different brush, so you can kind of get an idea of how it applies with different brushes. I do think that this is going to be best with a softer foundation brush. I actually tend to prefer the synthetic brushes for application with this foundation versus the natural hair, which, although very soft, you know, I feel like I can see some brush strokes a little bit more with that versus something like the BK Beauty brushes or the Koh Gen Do buff brush. Those are kind of my go-to synthetic brushes, or then also the Kyoto F04, which is synthetic. But I do feel like the BK Beauty and the Koh Gen Do, the shape of those is just a little bit better for application of this. I feel like something with an angle or a rounded finish to it, a rounded top, is going to give you a little bit of a softer, more perfected look. Now you can see when you put this foundation on, you definitely want to have a nice base. So what I mean by that is it is going to be a matte foundation. It is going to be a little bit dry, which means that you do want to make sure your skin is well hydrated. And I'll show you a clip of today up close in just a minute here, where you can see, you know, my forehead is actually a little bit, my skin on my forehead right now is a little bit drier than the rest of my face. And even with a more hydrating primer or anything on that, if your skin is dry, you're going to see that. So this foundation is going to be best for those that don't have any dry patches on their skin. Now, I also think that this foundation is not best for those with the oiliest skin types either. This is definitely going to be best for more balanced skin types. You can even go slightly dry as long as you have no like dry patches like flakiness or anything. And you could go slightly combo, but if you're on the oilier end of that, I would stay away from this foundation. The reason for that, and you can see in the first wear test where I gardened in this. So I was planting flowers and I got all sweaty, and you can see that the sweat really provided, it caused some separation of the product. So it didn't look that great there. I also got rained on. So I tested it again in similar conditions, you know, when it was a little bit warmer out, got a little bit sweaty. And again, the separation did occur. So I just feel like if you do have a tendency to, you know, have a little bit more oil production throughout the day, this foundation really doesn't hold up that well to those conditions. So overall, I'd have to say that the finish of this, it gives you a really nice soft blurred matte finish, but the formula is a little bit finicky and you really want to have kind of that perfect skin as a base to go into this to really get that perfect finish. That doesn't mean you have to have perfect skin on its own, but you do want to make sure that when you're putting this foundation on, if your skin's a little dry, you're using a hydrating primer. If it's a little oily, use something to help kind of cancel out that oil, such as something like the Surat Perfectioniste primer or the Danessa Myricks Yummy Skin Blurring Balm powders. Those powders help to absorb oil throughout the day. So something like that will help as a base underneath this foundation if you have oilier skin. Now, according to Tom Ford, this foundation is sculpted softness, blurred precision. This luxe lightweight liquid formula applies seamlessly for a soft matte finish and extended 24-hour wear. Soft focus microsphere powders diffuse light and help control oil, while hyaluronic acid and powerful antioxidants nourish and protect skin. It's available in 40 shades. And it's supposed to feel lightweight on the skin and maintain a freshly applied feel and finish all day. There's 24-hour wear, fade resistant. It's also 24-hour non-creasing and non-settling, non-caking and non-pouring, transfer proof and waterproof, all day oil control, perspiration and humidity resistant, immediate and 12-hour moisture. So you can see they definitely have a lot of adjectives and phrases to describe this particular foundation. But in my personal opinion, I find this to be a little bit of a finicky matte foundation. It gives you a beautiful finish, but you do need to start off with the right base. And I don't think it holds up to these 24-hour claims. Even with my longer wear tests, I feel like it just doesn't look great at the end of the day. Now, I would have to say it definitely holds up to the fact that, you know, it feels weightless, it feels fresh on the skin. It never feels oily, it never feels like it's separating. You know, it always feels comfortable. My skin has never felt tight or dry or like I have makeup on it. But I just don't think when I go and look in the mirror after a longer day that it looks like it is freshly applied. So let's go ahead and take a look at the shade now that it has been, it's been quite a while now, almost 10 minutes, and then we'll look at a few comparisons. All right, so this is 00, and you can see this is our thickly applied swatch. This is it kind of buffed into the skin, and you can see it definitely provides some blurring effect. You can see this side versus this side of my hand, and there is going to be a bit of a blurring finish. Now, it does say that it's non-settling, non-creasing, and so forth. So let me just zoom you in here so you can see what my skin looks like. I've got kind of this dry skin on my forehead right now, and you can see that this is being emphasized by the foundation. It looks flaky. Before I put the foundation on, I didn't see that. It's not something I noticed. So I do think that that's kind of an issue. I also noticed some of the lines around my mouth with this foundation. So I do think that it will settle into fine lines, and yeah, I think it's an okay foundation, but I don't think it is all that it is described to be. So let's take a look at a fresh swatch here of the foundation. And one of the nice things about this is you can see there's very little oxidation. I mean, look at those swatches. They're pretty much the same. Now, like most matte foundations, this is one that it dries fairly quickly. So do one side at a time or an area at a time. Don't like dot all over your face and then rush to blend it in, because it will look a bit patchy then. But, you know, that's true of pretty much every matte foundation. And I would have to say this reminds me the most of the new Sisley Phyto Temp Perfection foundation. So let's go ahead and swatch this one here next to it. And I have the shade 00N Pearl. And the Sisley is also a bit of a finicky foundation. You want to have a great base to put this on, and you know, it gives pretty much a very similar appearance on the skin. But I have to say, I do like the Sisley more than the Tom Ford. I feel like the Sisley doesn't settle into lines as much, doesn't separate as easily as a Tom Ford. It's almost as though the Tom Ford has a little bit more powder in there, but it doesn't react as well with the rest of the formula. So over time, I feel like it just doesn't hold up as well as the Sisley does. So we can see there are Sisley and our Tom Ford shades here. They match pretty well. 00N from Sisley and 00 from Tom Ford. And then let's take a look at a couple more matte foundations. This is the Cle de Peau Radiant Matte. I'm going to put this one, we'll put it right next to Sisley here. This is shade I-10, which is my go-to Sisley shade. Cle de Peau shade. And you can see it's going to be a little bit more neutral than the Sisley. The Sisley has a little bit more peach. The Tom Ford is just slightly less peach than the Sisley, but it still has more of a peachy hue to it compared to the Cle de Peau, which has a little bit more ivory in it. But all three shades are pretty comparable. And then the last one I wanted to look at is the Chanel Ultra Latent in BD01. And this and the Cle de Peau are probably my go-to matte foundations. You know, I feel like the formulas on these are a little bit less finicky than the Tom Ford or the Sisley. You can see though that the Chanel is going to be a little bit deeper. You can see we definitely have some peach. It's going to match up. It's like the Sisley peach is a little rosier, whereas this is going to be a little bit more, it's a little bit of a warmer peach. So here, this is the Chanel BD01, Tom Ford 00 from here on. This is our Sisley 00N, and this one here is Cle de Peau I-10. You can see all of those shades are fairly comparable. While we're taking a look at cheek products, let's take a look at the Danessa Myricks shade in It Girl. And I have to say, I really like these. I love her Blurring Balm line in general. The powders and the blushes both contain an ingredient called Upsolite, which basically it helps absorb oil throughout the day. So I think it works really well for summer and for those with oilier skin tones. So this is It Girl. You can see it's going to be a nice bright pink. We have kind of that blue hue in the base there, so it's going to be a cool tone pink. And let's take a look at the demo. So in the demo, this demo actually kind of shows you a little bit more about the Tom Ford Soft Matte, because you can see that I first put the Danessa Myricks on bare skin, built that up, and I wanted to see how well it would shine through the matte foundation. And you can see that the Tom Ford actually covers it pretty well. You can't really see much of a hint of color through the Tom Ford, even with gentle patting. So the Tom Ford does give you nice coverage. Now, this shade in general is really beautiful. And with a lot of these Blurring Balm powders from Danessa Myricks, I like to use the underpainting technique where I'll put them on more brightly and then I put a light coverage foundation on top. That definitely will work with this product, with this particular shade, but not with this particular foundation. So I think it's a really beautiful shade and I love this. I also love how you can actually blend this out very softly and get a really soft blush of color. So I'm wearing it now, and you can see in the demo here, I'm wearing it on top of the foundation, just lightly patted in, but you could also use a brush for application as well. Let's take a look at just a couple comparisons. All right, so this is another shade of the Danessa Myricks. You can see that this is more red versus the pink in It Girl. This is the shade Prima Donna, and this is definitely more of I'm gonna put this down here because it's very different, but it is more of a strawberry red shade. Really beautiful. This one is definitely great for underpainting. It's going to be a little bit deeper even when you shear this one out than the It Girl. So the It Girl can go a little bit lighter. Now, another comparison, this is the Armani Powder Blush in 52. And this is a really nice cool tone, soft pink as well. You can see it is going to be very similar. We have a little bit more blue in the Armani. So the Armani has, because of that blue, it has almost a little bit more of a purpley hue to it in certain lighting. Another one I want to take a look at is the Valentino. This was holiday this year. This is 302. And this is a new shade. This is going to be a bit deeper. It's a bit more magenta. You can see it doesn't have quite the same type of brightness, whereas this has a little bit more of that neon brightness. This is more like, has more depth. So another option here is the Westman Atelier stick in Pop It, and we're going to put that right here. And again, you can see this one's going to be a little bit more magenta as well, not quite as vibrant in the same sense that the Valentino isn't. And then last up, we have the Basma blush in Fuchsia. And let's see how this compares. You can see that these two look pretty similar to each other in the pan. So let's go ahead, we'll put this one right up top here. You can see that the formula for the Basma is going to be a bit more sheer. It's going to be a little bit lighter. You can't get quite as much pigment here, whereas the Danessa Myricks has more of a powder finish to it. But they are going to be similar colors. This one here has a little bit more blue in the Basma compared to the Danessa Myricks, which definitely is going to be more pink. So this is slightly more similar to the Armani, which is this one right here. You can see, however, that it's going to be a bit more vibrant. So just one more time for our swatches. This is the Basma and Fuchsia. These two here are It Girl from Danessa Myricks. This is Prima Donna from Danessa Myricks. Westman Atelier in Pop It. This is the Armani in 52. And then we have the Valentino in 302. The pink is Punk. So those are my comparisons. Let's move on to another product. All right, so let's take a look at the Dior Pastel Glow. Now, this is the only item I have from the summer collection so far, but not everything has been released here in the US. We're gonna start off swatching these. You can see I've got a little bit of staining here on my arm. So I'm going to make this 2 swatches in width, just so we can really see the colors. And can see this is going to be our lilac or lavender shade. You can see there's a little bit of a pinky hue to it. There is some shimmer. Next, we have kind of this soft shimmery peach. And I have to say, this is actually, it's probably my favorite shade in the palette, which is a little bit of a surprise. I thought for sure it'd be the purple. Then here in the center, it looks kind of white with a little bit of a greenish hue to it. There's a little hint of lime in here. Now you can see, even just putting this on, this shade is going to be a little bit more powdery than than any of the other shades in the palette. So while sometimes these lighter shades can be hard to pick up, this one really isn't. And then we have this kind of orangey tan shade here, and this is going to be a strong satin. We've got a little bit of shimmer in here, but it's really more of a true satin shade. And then our last shade here is going to be a deep, kind of like a redwood. You know, we've got kind of that rich chestnut brown with a little bit of a red hue to it. And you can see all of these shades have some shimmer. They all have some sheen to them. They all have very, very fine micro glitter in them. So the lighter shades, if they are closer to your skin tone, they can look a bit frosty. So let's take a look at the eye swatches and the demos while we talk about this palette. This is 933 Pastel Glow. It is limited edition for summer 2024 from Dior. This palette is 4 grams of product and it's made in Italy. And like all of their other palettes, we have a 6-month shelf life. Now, I feel like Dior's quality has been hit or miss, particularly since they changed their formula last year. And this one is one of the better ones. So the formulas on all 5 of these shades, they all perform well. They go on smoothly. They blend out beautifully. We have very soft, light shades for the majority. Our last 2 shades are going to be a bit more vibrant and give you some depth. And I personally love having that mix of depth of color in the palette. I love having those lighter washes of color, but I do think for a complete palette, it's nice to have something with depth. Now, in the demo for today's look, I did want to see how putting one of the lighter shades, the lavender, on top of your deeper brown shade, whether or not it would make the purple more pigmented, but it really doesn't. It kind of gets lost in there. So these formulas, they don't necessarily layer too well. They have their own level of opacity. So none of them are particularly sheer. You have some light shades, but they still have a certain level of opacity. And the darker shades, however, are definitely going to be a bit more overwhelming in comparison to those lighter shades. All of the shades, as I mentioned, do have some shimmer to them. If we're looking at the lavender, the peach, and that whitish lime shade, it's kind of like an ivory lime. Those are all going to have more of a cooler toned silver-based shimmer to them, whereas that pumpkin peach and the redwood brown have more of a golden shimmer to them. So the golden shimmer isn't quite as noticeable in that pumpkin tan kind of shade, the bottom left. But in the redwood, you can really see some gold glinting in there. And I have to say, I think it's a really gorgeous shade. So my personal favorite shades in this palette are actually the peach, the lavender, and that redwood shade. I think they're absolutely gorgeous. And, you know, you can do so much with them. Personally, when I was younger, one of my favorite eye looks was just taking like usually like an olive green. I loved the Chantecaille Olive Brocade. I still love that one. Eyeliner, I put that on and then top it with a peach eyeshadow, sometimes matte, sometimes shimmery. This is that shade though that I always used to use. It was an old discontinued mineral makeup shade that I loved, but this is pretty much the same shade with a touch of shimmer, and it's just so gorgeous for an easy one and done makeup look, and you can pair it so well with other things. The purple I think is really pretty. We do have a little bit of a pink hue to it, but there's not enough pink or red in this base to give you kind of that red eye look. So I think it's a really nicely balanced lavender shade here. And you can make this more pigmented by, you know, dabbing it on with your finger. You could use it wet, but honestly, I don't find this formula is the best used wet. I feel like the texture of this is just not quite right for that. It can be done, but it's just not my personal recommendation with this formula. I think it performs better dry. It's a little easier not to get any patchiness with the dry formula versus using it applied damp. And then that redwood shade, again, it's just so beautiful for a deeper one and done or for deepening the crease. Now, a lot of times people do prefer to have some sort of matte shade in the palette. And again, we really don't here. Now, I do wish that they had replaced this bottom left-hand shade with something a little different. You know, we've been seeing a lot of kind of these orange-based shades a lot recently, and I think this would have been a good opportunity to add in something a little different. I actually would have loved to have seen a green in here, kind of like an olive green or maybe like a brighter spring green, and I think that just would have complemented the palette really well and been something a little bit more unexpected and unique, because as it is, unless you're using the purple, the rest of the shades are very similar to other palettes you may already have. You know, like it's not a particularly unique color story aside from that purple, which again is going to be a softer shade, so it's not truly a bright pop of color. Now, the ivory lime I think is a really nice shade. However, I do think it gets a little bit lost in this palette. It just, unless you're using it all over, you don't really notice the hint of lime in there. And it's a little underwhelming compared to the other shades. So although I do really like that shade, I just think that it kind of gets lost a little. So no issues with the shade though. I think it's gorgeous. It's just not something that stands out much in this palette. So overall, I have to say I do really like this palette. I think we have a nice formula, we have a nice color story, but it's not terribly unique or amazing. So I can't say that it is a love for this particular palette. And even though this is a nice formula for this eyeshadow, I still do prefer the older formula of the Dior shadows before the reformulation last year. So, you know, this is definitely one of those better ones, but still not as great as those older formulas. Let's go ahead and take a look at a few comparisons. The first palette that came to mind is actually this one here from Addiction Tokyo. This was part of Holiday for 2023, and this is the palette Undream 102. So let's go ahead, we're gonna just go ahead and swatch this palette vertically. And I think maybe this is why I thought that a green would be so nice in this palette, because I do really love the green in this particular palette. We've got the orange and browns and the lavender, and I just think it's just a little bit more complete with the Addiction. Plus we have a mix of finishes, which I don't mind all of the shimmery shades, especially since we have some deeper shades and some lighter shades, but it's also not the most versatile in that sense. I also wanted to take a look at a few Suku palettes. So this is 137, and let's go ahead and swatch this one. And this is obviously going to be a very different color story because we're looking at like all purple, but I did want to show you how the shades compare. And you can see that our closest match is going to be this second shade here in the Suku palette, color-wise. But this is a matte in Suku. So here's a Suku versus the lavender in the Dior. And then this is Suku 132. So I wanted to go ahead and share this one as well, because we do have kind of a little bit of a more similar color story having this gold in here, but it is a very different palette. So you can see none of those shades are going to match the Dior. And then this is the Guerlain Summer Jean palette from last year, from 2023. This is number 518. It was limited edition. Let's take a look at the purple and the brown here and see how those compare. And these are going to be matte. We'll put the purple right here, put the brown right here, and you can see how different they are from the Dior. So the shade of purple is pretty similar to the shade in the Dior, but the Guerlain has more depth and is going to be a more of a, it's a satin, but it's not as strong of a satin as the Dior. So it's definitely more matte in comparison to the Dior shade, which you can see is going to be lighter and more shimmery. The brown is kind of a cross between the two Dior shades here. And then this is the Cle de Peau purple palette, which, what is this one? It is number 12, Purple Ocean Twilight. And although the palette itself is going to be pretty different, let's go ahead and take a look. We'll put this one right up here at the top, so we can kind of see how those shades kind of match up. We have this primer shade. Whoops, I guess I did not secure that. Thankfully, it didn't go anywhere. But this would be our Purple Ocean Twilight from Cle de Peau. And you can see that the purples, the first purple in the Cle de Peau and the Dior, are actually going to be pretty similar in shade. The Cle de Peau has a little bit more blue and it's not as shimmery. It's also a little bit more opaque. All right, so those are my comparisons for the Dior. So you can see we've got the Dior palette here, Pastel Glow. This is Cle de Peau. This is the Addiction Tokyo Undream. This is these two are both Suku, actually. And then this is the Guerlain Summer Dream or Summer Jean from 2023. So I hope that was helpful. Let's go ahead and move on to the Charlotte Tilbury lip products. So the Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk is pervasive, it's redundant, you know, it's pretty much, we see Pillow Talk versions come out the wazoo from her line. But she just created a new fair, Pillow Talk Fair. Now her previous Pillow Talk palettes, or products, I really love the color of the lip products. The old formula, it always turned orange on me. I've really liked her new lipsticks that just came out, so I wanted to try the new fair one. So let's start off with the lip pencil here. And I have to say, I really like this lip pencil. You can see that it is going to be a rosy nude. There's a little bit of mauve in here, but I think it's a really beautiful shade. This is definitely a great everyday lip liner for me. Now the lipstick, notice we have the old packaging, the gold packaging versus our new pink packaging. So I don't know if that indicates anything with the formula, but the lipstick is warmer than I thought. So here's the lipstick in Pillow Talk Fair. You can see it's definitely going to be more of a peachy pink shade. It's a pretty milky shade. And then I picked up the new Big Lip Plumpgasm in the shade Medium Deep. And yeah, I thought the light one looked too light, but you can see we do have, you know, this will spring up. So you have to push it down firmly to close. And then I'm going to put this one here, but this is the lip gloss. And this is what I have on my lips right now, but I have it layered over the lipstick, which was blotted, and the lip liner. Now, one thing I want to draw your attention to, I've now had all of this makeup on for almost 2 hours at this point. You can see this liner on my lips. This line is not lip liner. This is irritation from the lip gloss. So let's take a look at the lip demos while we talk about this. Now, the lip pencil is the Pillow Talk Fair. It's the Lip Cheat Reshape and Resize lip liner. We have 1.2 grams of product and a 2-year shelf life. And this is going to be made in the United States. I have to say, I really like the lip liner. It's creamy to go on. It sets, it stays put fairly well. It's not the longest lasting lip liner, but I think these are really good lip pencils. And this color in particular is a really great everyday kind of rosy nude shade. Now, when we're looking at this shade compared to the lipstick, you can see the lipstick definitely has more peach in it, whereas the lip pencil has more mauve in it. So the lip pencil is going to be cooler in hue versus the lipstick, which definitely is going to be more peach. It's definitely a peachy pink. The lipstick itself has more of, you know, it's a satin finish, but it has a little bit more of an opaque cream vibe to it with more of a satin overlay. So I feel like when you put this on, a light layer looks best. If you put on too much, I feel like it kind of ends up looking a little bit like that old-fashioned cream lipsticks versus the newer ones. So I think it's, I don't love this lipstick. You know, I think it's okay. It's definitely warmer than I expected, but I feel like it doesn't seem to be as nice as the new ones that she just recently released. So I'm not sure why that is, but I think part of it has to do with the opacity of this one. Perhaps the base is a little bit different, but it definitely doesn't seem to give the same vibe on the lips as the newer shades. So we'll take a look at a couple of those in comparison. Now, the lip gloss, whatever you want to call this plumping lip gloss, I love the color of this. I love the way it looks on the lips. I think it's a really beautiful shade. However, it burns. So if you love those plumping lip glosses that are very intense, this one is that. Actually, it reminds me of the Gucci lip glosses, which also have kind of that burning intensity to them. I don't love either of them personally. I find them to be a little bit too irritating for myself. Now, I don't taste or smell any mint or cinnamon to this, but to me, it reminds me more of like cayenne pepper. So it's a little bit irritating to my personal skin, but I do think it's a beautiful color. The applicator is easy to use. It has a really nice texture on. It's a smooth lip gloss. It's not super long wearing. I would say 2 to 3 hours, and you probably want to reapply. Now, just a few specs. We went over the specs for the lip pencil, but the lipstick has an 18-month shelf life. It has 3.5 grams of product, and it is going to be made in Italy, whereas the lip gloss is going to be made in Italy with a 1-year shelf life and 5.5 milliliters of product. And this is, you know, represented as heat and ice technology with hyaluronic acid and collagenere. And it says pump, Plump and Pout Power Plump Effect Gloss, long-lasting hydrating comfort with a 3D optical illusion glazed finish. So I think this lip gloss is going to be one that some people will really love. If you like those more tingly sensation kind of plumping lip glosses, this one's pretty intense. Scent wise, these all have kind of that similar Charlotte Tilbury lip scent with a little bit of that vanilla fruity floral kind of fragrance to it. So that stays true between the lip gloss and the lipstick. So let's take a look at the other Charlotte Tilbury lipsticks that just came out. These are going to be the satin versions, and I'm just going to go ahead and swatch the ones that I have. We have Red Carpet Pink. We're going to put these this way so we can kind of see them. You can see that Red Carpet Pink is going to be a bit cooler in tone. It's got more pink to it than the Pillow Talk Fair. Then we have Icon Baby. Now this one has some shimmer. And you can see that this is also going to be, it's got a little bit of peach in there, but this is really going to be more of your nude pink, your classic nude pink. So it's neutral. And then we have 90s pink. And you can see this is going to be deeper. It has a bit more mauve. And I think it's a really pretty shade. I really love that one. And then Rose to Fame, which is my most used. And that's just going to be a little bit more berry-like than the 90s pink. We've got it's a little bit cooler in tone. So you can see how much peachier this one is. And you can also kind of see the difference in the finish, that this one here definitely has a stronger, more of a whiter or ivory base to it compared to these, which have a little bit more translucency to the shades. So I hope that was helpful. Let's just do a quick review of everything we went over. We started off with the Tom Ford Architecture Soft Matte Foundation, which has replaced the Traceless Soft Matte Foundation. Overall, although the shade range has changed a little bit, I was able to find my match fairly easily, and I think it is an okay foundation. It has a beautiful finish on the skin, provided you're giving it a perfect base to start off with, but it can be a little finicky, and I don't believe that it lives up to its claims of like 24-hour wear, non-creasing, and so forth. It does look very nice on the skin if you start off with that perfect base though. So I would say this is okay, but for $150 US, for me, it's not a love. Next, we took a look at the Danessa Myricks It Girl blush. And I have to say, I think this is a great blush. I love her Blurring Balm blushes for the summer in particular, especially when I'm outside, because they do help absorb the oil. They still give me kind of that matte finish. It looks fresh. They stay put all day. And I think this is a great bright pink for the season. So I really like this one. Then we took a look at the Dior Pastel Glow, and I think this is a nice palette. If you take out the purple, it's going to be pretty similar to other palettes that we have seen before. So, you know, you've got kind of your basic neutral, you know, warm tone palette there. And then we add in the lavender, and it adds a little something special, but our lavender is a very light sheer shade. So it's not going to be an amazing, wow, you have to have this kind of palette, even for purple lovers, in my opinion. But I do think it's a nice palette. I would say, you know, it's definitely one of the better ones from Dior recently, but in my opinion, it's not one that is a must-have. It's not, wow, amazing. So moving on, we have the Charlotte Tilbury lip products. I love the lip pencil. This is going to become one of my go-to shades. The shade itself is just such a great mauvey nude, nude pink shade, and it's light. A lot of times it's hard to find something like this that is not too deep. So I think this is a really great pencil, the formula wise and color wise. So that I really like. The lipstick, I don't really care for the lipstick. It's a little bit too peach for me and too opaque. And then the lip gloss, I actually really like the color of it, but it's a bit too intense in the plumping for me. Not that my lips get too plumped, but the burning sensation is a little too intense for me. So that's definitely going to work better for people who really like that. I do find it to be a little irritating for me personally. So I hope that was helpful. I'd love to know if you've tried any of these products, what your thoughts are, and hopefully the comparisons were helpful to either decide that you need something or you don't need something. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you very soon.